Thank you everybody for coming out today. I am the last presenter for today, so it was really great to see a lot of people coming and presenting, and interesting to hear everybody's input. I will present to you a very high level kind of overview on what my research is going to be about for the end of my semester in this open access course. So one of the things I'm looking at is institutional repositories and the BC ELN. I'll explain what that is. So very quickly, institutional repositories, just because a lot of people went over it today. So they're online archives. They're a service provided by most post-secondary institutions. And the licensing is at the discretion of the institution, though more and more are open access. At U Ottawa, we have our UO Research repository that does provide 100% open access to all of the content that's uploaded there. To my knowledge, all of the content that is on UO Research is indexed through the U Ottawa library. So if you have access to that, you have access to all of the UO Research articles through that method, though you can search it up on your own if you don't have access to our library. But our library does not necessarily index resources from open access repositories from other post-secondary institutions. So the British Columbia Electronic Library Network, or BCELN, is a partnership between the province of British Columbia and post-secondary institutions. So they work to negotiate licenses between publishers, content providers, and they coordinate resource sharing among their partners. I know it's very, very small. You won't be able to read it on this slideshow, but on the side there, I have a list of the 34 post-secondary libraries that are partnered in this network. So they all share the content that BCELN organizes, and they have access to the repository that I'm going to be talking about today. So they are also participating in the Provincial Digital Library Project, which was announced by the province of British Columbia in 2014. And they have a large part in the first step of that project, which was ARCA. So the first phase of the PDL was accomplished with the launch of ARCA, BC's post-secondary collaborative digital repository. It's a collaborative initiative that puts the development and implementation of a digital repository within reach for every institution at a reasonable cost in a supportive environment. So ARCA is a collaborative repository. So I believe currently there are 11 post-secondary institutions that have kind of merged their institutional repositories into one available resource. So they all share this information. I believe there's another 4 that are kind of in the works right now. So it is an expanding project. And I think it's really neat to see how everybody who is involved in this project will have access to the same resources. Not that they wouldn't otherwise, but they will have access to it within one index database, which is nice. So although ARCA is mainly intended to be an open access repository, each individual institution can determine whether their content will be public, visible, embargoed, or password protected. This made me raise some questions at first, like, is this really open access? But then looking further into it, everything that is currently on ARCA is open access, and it is indexed by a website that Heather introduced to us earlier this semester, BuzzSearch, as 100% open access as well. So that's probably just there to say that ultimately the institutions who participate are not forced into any kind of licensing agreement. They do have power over it at the end, though open access seems to be going very well as of this moment. So in order to compare it, I looked at some other institutional repositories that are available in the province, just based on the size of the university, and I found 3 of the largest ones from Simon Fraser, UBC, and Vancouver Island University. And all this information is gathered from opendoor.org. I just kind of gathered the kinds of subjects that they say that they're indexing, as well as the number of items that they have in each of their repositories. The subjects that they list is limited to the metadata that they have provided to OpenDoor in this case. So even though it looks like Simon Fraser University has listed quite a few topics there, I'd say it's fairly multidisciplinary. This is what they have listed. ARCA is ultimately a multidisciplinary repository. And so just to compare that, I'm still looking at a way to frame my research, so I'm probably going to be using not just the number of items that are in the repository, though I've listed it here, but also the topics that are available, the kinds of resources that are available, because it's not just academic resources, but also I'm finding a lot of historical photographs and information about the institutions themselves. So I'm going to have to look at that in order to kind of evaluate the resource a little bit more. So some of the benefits to using a collaborative repository include being more likely to be indexed by search engines such as Baz Search. Not that some of the smaller ones wouldn't be indexed, but the larger a repository is, and the more people that have direct access to it, the more known it's going to be, and the more likely it is going to be that students from different institutions are going to be able to cite the same material. It also creates a set of standards for content. So just looking at the ARCA backend, they do set kind of guidelines and standards for what the institution should be putting into their repositories and what kind of information would be better for them to just kind of post publicly on their own website, so that we're not getting a lot of kind of inconsistencies in what we see in the databases, so that you can be sure that when you go to ARCA, there is going to be a certain set of information available, especially useful if that's more focused at academic material and that's something that you're looking for. It is cost effective. I do need to be comparing this to any information that I find published online, though there's going to be a little bit of conflict with this depending on whether or not some of the post-secondary institutions post their financial information. But a lot of them do post their kind of their staffing, I guess, so I might be able to look at that, the kind of full-time equivalents that are available at each of the institutions and the amount or quality of the content that they provide. And it gives students easier access to content from other students at post-secondary institutions that are not their own. So I know that myself, when doing research, I will automatically go to our library's website and use some of the databases that are available there, or even just use the search results that the library search engine gives me. And I've come across things on UO research, but as of this year, knowing about some of the other repositories that are available and knowing about the other information that I have available to me, I will use search engines that index open access repositories from other academic institutions that I might not otherwise have known about. And it's really interesting to see a lot of academic material that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. Because if you take out search engines that index these repositories, it's very unlikely that students go to the individual websites for each academic institution and say, hey, I want to check out the institutional repository for Queen's, now I'll check out like U of T. It's not very practical. So I do think that that's a really neat way to use a collaborative repository. And I also think that it's going to promote faculty and graduate students to use repositories more, furthering the open access movement. I think a lot of people either aren't aware of them, or they don't really see a push, or they're not told to put their materials into the repository of their institution. Sometimes they might think that it's a copyright issue, but authors always have the right to put at least preprints into their institutional repository, which I think is a good way of furthering the open access movement, especially since we have this reward system that is based on publishing right now. So this is a way that you can still get your material open access and out to the public, even if it's been published in something like Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, something like that. So I'll be using some of these different resources to pull my information. The Sherpa Romeo one was really interesting, that I learned about this year as a tool that specifically lists your rights in regards to each of the large publishers, as well as some of the smaller publishers, in regards to what you have published with them and what you're allowed to do with your work afterwards. So you might find out that even if your work has been published, you're sometimes allowed to put the postprints available for free in your institutional repository. So I think it's almost crazy that we don't have more of that available to us today. So yes, that is going to be the base for my research. This is the website. I find it fairly clean cut. It's fairly easy to search with, and you can see the partner institutions as well if you'd like to search any one of these as they would have been individually before they were a collaborative approach. So you can just go straight into, say, the Emily Carr University of Art and Design and see what they have in their repository. So it's really neat. I look forward to learning more about this. And once again, thank you all for coming today.